All righty, module 6. So we are continuing to talk about fluency. Okay. Gosh, my kids are so loud. I apologize if anybody hears them in the background. My oldest daughter definitely got her. She's loud like her mom, like me. I'm not a quiet person. Okay. So fluency treatment. So we talked a little bit last week about stuttering, fluency. We definitely talked about kind of some of the characteristics. What are some of the things? So last week, we've looked at stuttering modification. There are some just kind of basics about stuttering. So this week, module 6, interventions. Let's talk, well, hold on, let me go to the read and review first. So there's some stuttering fact sheet, there's tips for parents, obviously. So let's go to the stuttering intervention. I'm sorry, I thought I took my old office hours. That's okay. You wanted to watch last semester's. So a couple different things. I will post tonight's on there. Okay. So if you looked at the styles, so there's definitely kind of a type of treatment style, I'll call it, called fluency shaping, where we're trying to make speech fluent. And there are activities that are more designed to help improve fluency. We're always trying to improve fluency, but I'm more of a realistic person, a realist, whatever you want to say, versus a perfectionist. So what I usually kind of tend to do more of the stuttering modification type style, but I have absolutely used fluency shaping strategies too. And I really think usually when we're treating stuttering, you need some combination of both. I don't think you could be all fluency shaping or all stuttering modification. I think each one lends itself depending on the client, depending on their response. I can tell you some things that I am not good at is a metronome. I don't have a musical talent in my body. That's for sure. I had a graduate intern who was like, I don't know, she had her master's in music something, and great with the metronome, great with like pacing, chorus speaking, all of those things. I had a supervisor probably my first or second year as an SLPA, and she did a lot with like drums and rhythm, and she had, you know, it was like kind of like a mini music class. I do think that if that's what you're inclined to, I think those are actually really fun and helpful things for stuttering if you can, you know, utilize those effectively. I don't have a musical bone in my body, so that's probably not me, but there are plenty of other therapists that are. Somebody was asking about biofeedback on this. There are some things too where, you know, you can look at speech on the spectrogram and those kinds of things. It's usually only in what I would call either a university clinic or a very sophisticated ear, nose, and throat specialist. And oftentimes this is some things that they use more in like what I say voice therapy, but it does relate to fluency too. I am not well versed or skilled in any of those. There is that Speech Easy thing. If you look that up, a Speech Easy, it's a device that's in your ear, and that's that delayed auditory feedback. I will tell you this though, being on Zoom this past year, if you've ever been, and I can't, so I always talk to this one OT a lot, and I constantly, and I don't know what it is about her system when I call her, I can tell right away if she's on her Bluetooth or her AirPods, because if you've said something and then you hear it again, like right after, that's what a Speech Easy does. And I can't talk to her. I always tell her, you gotta take me off Bluetooth. I cannot, it's so hard for me to talk to her. But I think if I was very disfluent, it would help me. But if you've ever had that, now that all of us have been on Zooms and all of those, you know, we're all on a device, headgear, whatever, you'll hear it. It's usually when you both are on Bluetooth is when you hear that, like that delayed auditory feedback. So if you've experienced that recently on Zoom, that's kind of what a Speech Easy does. And that's what it's delayed auditory feedback. Speech Easy is kind of the brand name of that device that does that. I think there's another one, but I don't think it's for the purpose of stuttering. I think it's for what I would say media and TV production. So some things too, rhythmical speech. Obviously, sometimes speech devices are helpful to kind of create that. And what we do know is that people don't stutter when they sing. So there's some kind of that piece, and I think it kind of activates some different parts of our brain. So very, if you're cued into that, feel free to use some of that. But let's talk. So those are some of the strategies you might use to help with stuttering. So that's on this slide. So a lot of what we do in working with in speech in treatment is we work with the feelings, because sometimes what happens, not always, but oftentimes, that stuttering creates beliefs and feelings about themselves, and we really don't want someone's self-esteem to be affected by that. So we talk about stuttering, we call it what it is, we don't place shame on it, and then we have, I did hit record, right? Sorry, I always do this in the middle, and I would, yes, okay, sorry. Thank you. That's my, oh gosh, did I do that? Okay, speech man. So we work with the feelings, we kind of talk about talking, how do they feel about it? The speech man, and we kind of, in the speech world, call it that. Basically what we're doing is we're helping the client build this. Okay, where are our articulators? What is our speech mechanism? How does it work? How is this related to physics? How is this related to sound? What does our body physiology do to produce sound? And label it. So we want them to be able to label, know there are parts of their body, and oftentimes we experience tension. So what's nice about this, if they know what we are labeling it. So we're calling our lips, our lungs are lungs, our diaphragm, because sometimes people don't know really what that is or what that means, but we might use that word. And how does the diaphragm play into fluency? So really, for them to understand anatomy and physiology is a good place, because that way you can reinforce some of the other things that you're going to use for strategies. So that's kind of the purpose of that. And hold on, let me move it over to this last slide. So using tools. So when we use the word tools, what that is a strategy to help improve their fluency. So we'll call them fluency shaping tools, speaking strategies. I might call them, what tool do they have when they're in this situation? Because sometimes the strategy you use in one situation doesn't work in another. So definitely some things there that we practice in therapy, we do, but we know there are factors that can impact their ability to use it effectively. So time pressures is usually one, personal feelings about certain things or the environment. How easy is it for them to use their strategies? So ideally, when we're coming up with strategies to help improve fluency, it should be an easy one for them to actually try to implement, and then we kind of talk about what are some other factors. Do they just clam up? Do they just get nervous? And what's really hard for our clients with stuttering is they often do have other kind of what I would call anxiety intensive situations because they don't want to stutter. I know I worked with an adult client a long time ago when I was a graduate student, and she talked a lot about, going to the doctor. She had some serious health concerns and going on, and she was getting that checked out. And she really wanted to talk to the doctor about it. And she had some neuro concerns. And then with her stuttering, to the severity that was kind of part of it. But she was nervous about having a conversation. So we talked about, okay, how do we problem solve that? We know this is going to be a stressful situation. What are things that we can do to help support you so they get your message? So pragmatic skills that affect fluency. So eye contact, what do they do if they're not in control, whether they can control things? Can they engage in some listening tasks? Can they do those repair strategies? So let's say they have a situation, they're not getting their message. Can they repair that? Do they have those skills? Say they had a bad stuttering episode, they kind of stopped what they were going to say, said something else. That happens a lot. Okay, but you really still need to get that previous point across that you kind of abandoned. I really need them to understand this, that I kind of stopped saying. So how do we do that? How do we work on that? So those are all activities. A lot of what we do for stuttering is helping them implement strategies, and then, okay, there's an issue in communication. How can we bridge the gap? How can we help get our message across? Definitely what I want to say, I can't stress this enough, probably one of the most beneficial things I see, and this is true not just for stuttering, but I would say articulation too, is the rate of their speech. So oftentimes we know it might be hard, we speed up, and that is absolutely the worst time to do that. So definitely working on that pacing, turn taking, if they're the kind with lots of tension, we might work on light contacts or easy starts. So where you kind of start that voicing and then go into the word. So if you see kind of an activity, okay, we're gonna start saying an H. So that in what speech science calls voice onset time. So we're kind of starting that voicing and then we ease into the first word. And that oftentimes helps with blocks. That happens with where they stutter on that first sound or that first syllable. So easy starts kind of helps reduce that tension to start, or the light contacts help reduce the tension that they're feeling. So cancellations, probably one of my favorite ones. A cancellation is basically they start talking. So, no, I can't think the sentence, of course, when I have to think one on the ball. Okay. I am going to the park. So that's what I want to say. I need to tell, somebody who wants to know where I'm going to the park, but I'm having a hard time. So it might go like this. I'm going to the park. So sometimes what helps is you're trying to get it out, then you're trying to say it, then there's tension and things. Sometimes it's good to just stop what you're saying, take a deep breath and really slow the pace. And what we find is, okay, now your brain has got that loop going. You know what you want to say. More often than not, it's easier for them to get it out the second time with less tension, stuttering behaviors, etc. So cancellation is basically like, okay, I started the sentence, I stuttered, now I'm going to stop, like just cancel what just happened and start again. So, and basically no matter where they stuttered in the sentence, you repeat the whole thing. So what the purpose of that is, communication is important. We're not going to discount what we say. And even if we have to repeat a little bit, it's easier to be redundant than for them to miss something. So sometimes we might repeat some of it or most of it, but that's okay. So we really work on that. And why is that important? It's better to repeat yourself so there's comprehension versus a lack of communication. So I like cancellations. I think some of that speech, understanding the speech man helps with doing an easy start, like contacts. Okay, slide out, pull out, ease out. We all have, here we go again, 3 different names for the same thing. So basically the slide out is when you're feeling that tension, the pull out or the ease out. So, I really don't like saying pull out method. I usually use the word slide out or ease out. Basically, so sometimes when you get that block, that tension, what we're trying to do is we feel it and then release, you kind of slide out of that tension. So for instance, if we are talking to, let's say, our boss, and today I called a psychologist, and I usually stutter when there's a lot of things going on because I can't focus my attention. And I couldn't remember the student's name, and I started to say it, but I knew it wasn't right. So, let's say her name was Jessica, and I started to say Jennifer. Well, I just got done with the Jennifer, and then I was trying to talk to the psychologist about Jessica. So I got stuck. I started saying and then I just was like Jessica. Then I kind of changed my trajectory. Kind of the beginning was the same, but I started saying the wrong name and I kind of stopped myself. And then I was like, oh, it was a lot of tension. And I kind of used it. I'm like, Jessica. So I didn't start all over. I was teasing with my graduate student was, I was explaining that was one of those fluency strategies that every now and then I have to use if I get stuck. So a pull out is just kind of, you have that tension and then you kind of ease into it. Or even if, let's say her name was something different, like Mary. Let's say I started saying Mary. If I just kind of pulled out of that word I was saying and go into another word, and then I might go, Mary Smith. Sorry, Mary Smith, not, so-and-so. Usually because I'm talking to the psych, we're talking about like 10 different students at a time. So those things can get a little dicey, and it's usually in a press. She's like, I got 2 minutes. Can we talk about this? Okay, sure. So we're both usually pressed for time when we're trying to have a little, mini conference. Okay, so voluntary stuttering, pseudo-stuttering. What I want to say about this is this is not a strategy. This is an activity you do to implement the strategies. So we're basically stuttering on purpose to practice a strategy. What's nice about this is I really feel like this helps a person can control this. Kind of you do something on purpose, it kind of takes away that control or that fear. So I feel like it's very empowering for a client. Okay, we're going to stutter on purpose. So I'll model it, and then they're going to model the stuttering, and we just do the stuttering. Now I might talk to them, especially if we practice strategies. Okay, what strategy do you think if we're going to stutter this way? And it usually mimics the stuttering episodes that they have. So I've got one particular client I work with, they have blocks and they have word repetition. Okay, here are the 2 ways we're going to do that. So let's start with blocks. You're going to have a block on this word. What strategy are we going to practice? So it might be we practice a cancellation each time, or we're going to practice only pull-outs. So we're going to stutter on purpose, and then we're going to practice this. So the nice thing about stuttering, voluntary stuttering, pseudo-stuttering, this is how we practice implementing strategies in a stuttering event. So it's not a strategy, it's a way to implement how to use the strategies, because we're not always there when a person has a stuttering episode, or we need to give them practice to how to implement this. So we got to kind of recreate that event. And really, honestly, most of the time, this might be a lifelong thing that they're going to have to manage at various times. So that's what I want to say about pseudo stuttering. So just remember, people write pseudo stuttering. That's not a strategy. It's a way to implement and practice strategies. So just for quick clarification, I feel like that's a concept a lot of people missed. Now, this week, sorry, we just did that. So research the fluency enhancing techniques or tools listed below. So let's talk about each of these. So what's an activity you might choose to help the client practice all 4 tools? So basically what I'm looking for, so easy onset. So we might do pseudo stuttering to practice each one of these. You cannot put that for each one. Basically, I'm going to try to practice the easy onset. Okay. How I'm going to teach the easy onset. So easy onset is basically like I said, we kind of do that H sound or that neutral vowel, like they kind of start voicing and then start the word. Cancellation, I just modeled that. They're going to stutter, and then they're going to stop, start all over. So sometimes what I do is I might, talk about a cancellation. And oftentimes too, I'm trying to figure out what's the cue to help them remember, because that's what's going to be key piece. I need them to learn and how to practice how to do cancellation. So for instance, I might do something where when I talk about a cancellation, it's basically stopping and starting all over. Okay, how am I going to practice that? Of course, we might do pseudo stuttering each one, but what's going to be the cue to help them remember, oh, now I got to use a cancellation, or what is going to be the activity that kind of demonstrates why that works? So oftentimes too, what I like to use is kind of easy onset might be what I call a balloon. I might blow it out, kind of show how, you let the air out a little bit instead of, you pop it. Popping it is loud, like we want to kind of start easy. So sometimes I show like air coming out. Cancellation, there's lots of different ways to show that. So kind of think about, usually we're trying to explain these concepts to often very young children. So when I say cancellation, how a 15-year-old understands a cancellation is going to be different than how a 4 or 5-year-old understands a cancellation. So light touch. So obviously light touch might be an activity where you have lots of different things to feel. And I kind of do something, what I would call light versus hard. Sometimes I'll demonstrate something heavy, like putting this on your hand or slamming this on your hand isn't going to hurt the way this, brick. Obviously I don't have brick, but something hard, something like paper is going to feel different versus, my turf is here. Slamming that on your hands is going to feel different than me slamming, my pad of paper. So sometimes I kind of differentiate between light and hard on them so they can kind of start, okay, this is what we're doing to our mouth. We want a light touch on our mouth, not a hard slam. We want a light touch. So oftentimes we're working on some of those multisensory things to help them understand what the concept is and why it works. So kind of, and a lot of times too, easy onset, I'll talk about like, especially if they're into cars, usually not little boys, motorcycles, whatever, you're going to kind of start up and then it's going to kind of be revving. And then you can't just, hit the gas. We got to kind of ease into it. You got to go the speed limit. And then we kind of get into it. So yeah, I've used like truck analogies, cancellation. I've used a wide variety of things. Oh, stop, start again, go back to go. Sometimes I might play, oh, see this cancellation, we're here. You have to go back to the beginning. When I'm trying to talk about that and I'll say, oh, we were canceled. We got to go back to the front. So I'm trying to prime them with how I'm going to give them cues to implement these strategies. Light touch. So definitely that light touch, oftentimes there's lots of tension. We're trying to ease the tension or have them aware of the tension, and then a slide out, ease out. So how am I going to explain that to them? What are some visual examples so they kind of get the conceptual things? Because what I think that's hard about stuttering is we're working with very young kids and trying to conceptualize a cancellation is really hard. We hope that they understand the language we are presenting this in, but oftentimes there's a lot more, what I would say, explanation and practice and priming for some of these more abstract concepts. So this is what's hard, I think, about fluency therapy. It's a lot of conceptualization and then kind of morphing that into our actual speech. And what somebody had said last time, and yes, do we model it? Yes. Do we try to label it? Yes. But sometimes we really have to spend time on explaining the easy onset and why that helps. Or why does it help us if we go back to the start and then say the whole thing? When I say light touch, they clearly are not using a light touch. So we want to try to develop that. And can they differentiate, soft, light, hard versus, that tension piece? So like rubber band's another one. Sometimes I like using that for a slide out, ease out, and kind of, or even like light touch, so that tension. So trying to explain tension, we use that word. What does that mean? How does that relate to their mouth? So kind of explaining tension piece, releasing that tension, feeling the tension. So it's a lot of how do you practice these tools and how do you develop these concepts with these very young children who conceptually maybe don't understand this in the same way we as adults can. So then that's, I think, in general, therapy is difficult in trying to explain kind of the purpose of it. Because what I want to say is if we just modeled it, they're not going to just do it because someone else has obviously already modeled things. We've already modeled fluent speech, and that's not doing that for them. So that's what's hard about some of the fluency things. I think trying to get those conceptualizations in for a young child and then apply it to their speech, lots of steps there, and also the cues. So we have to remember in general, just in therapy in general, the cue that we're giving, do they understand what that means? What did I say today? And I realized, okay, he didn't understand what I just told him to do. I said something like circle back. I was in middle school today. I said something about circle back. He did not. And basically what I meant, like, go back to the front, circle on back and let's start again. Basically, he was not understanding what I meant by that. And I was like, okay, circle back. That means go back to the beginning, circle back to the start, or, that took a little bit of an explanation to him. So sometimes as his therapist, we will use cues, and we sometimes need to filter what we're saying. Okay, they're not understanding a cue. To me, that might be pretty blatant, but we have to remember they're not necessarily our stuttering clients. They're not necessarily language impaired. They could have some other, what I would say, comorbid things going on. But what we have to remember is these cues. So a light contact, a cancellation, that's arbitrary. We need to kind of give them that power of understanding what that means. So that's what's hard about fluency. That's sometimes hard about some other things in therapy that we do. But a lot of times what I say is, and I'll say this probably 2 or 3 times, do you understand what that means? And if they say yes, because 90% of the time they're going to say yes, say, okay, so tell me. I'll say, oh, tell Miss Kendra, what does that mean? Or can you tell so-and-so? Sometimes there's another kid in the group. I'm like, oh, can you tell your friend Johnny what that means? Explain it to him. So sometimes I like them to give an explanation to make sure I'm checking for comprehension. Sometimes I want them to define a word. Like today I was doing some things with some, what I would call feeling words. And we were talking about synonyms and kind of like levels of anger. So I said, do you know the difference between livid and enraged, or annoyed and bothered? To them, that was all the same level of anger. Or, and we were kind of talking about the levels, but I was like, okay, they really don't understand some of these words. We need to work on what that means. And giving examples that might help too. So sometimes you have to kind of do a lot of activities to get that concept. Okay, and then this week we have a fluency observation. So be sure to look at that. And then I think we have a quiz. Oh no, read and review summary. No quiz this week. Just the fluency enhancing activities. 1 second. Yes. Okay. So fluency enhancing tools assignment. So you still might use pseudo stuttering to try to practice all those, but we've got to have them conceptualize that strategy in a way to then help them apply it. So it's kind of really what that assignment's looking for. And then fluency observation, and then read and review. So I just want to pop in this real quick. So there's 2 websites on the read and review. So basically look at that, make a 2-paragraph, a full 2-paragraph summary. What are tips for parents and teachers? You have a child or student that stutters. What are some things we should be doing to support them? Because what happens that I think is sabotaging is they're well-meaning, they're well-intended, but sometimes that hinders the progress. So like finishing their words, reminding them to slow down. Sometimes if they need to work on pacing, we might need a different cue. Slowing down, obviously 100 people have told them that already and they're not doing it. So that's not a good cue to give somebody. Or, you know, think about what you want to say. So those kinds of things, what not to do, and here are ways to help them. So that's what I'm looking for in the read and review. And what's nice is that these are things that you're going to be giving to people in therapy. You're going to see a person for stuttering. You're going to give their caregivers and support system ways and tips and tricks to help and support them. So we're always trying to support the communication environment. Ideally, usually that's, you know, their primary family, and then their environment in their day, whether that's work, school, you know, whatever. Can we give them strategies and support in those settings? Because ideally, we don't want them just to do well when they come see us. We want them to be able to implement and use these strategies when they leave us. So that's our purpose and our goal. So that's what I'm looking for. What are some things we should remind others to do? Like I just talked to a parent at baseball. I said, just wait. Don't try to finish the sentences. Sometimes if they really can't get it out, it might be then you need to use the word show me. Can you show me what you wanted? Or can you show me what's wrong? Can you point? So sometimes we might need to give a cue if they're really having, but I was just talking to a parent about this, like finishing it, you know, isn't going to help the situation, just might make it maybe more exasperated for their child. So just some things, look at that. If you aren't sure, please let me know, but there should be some good helpful hints. There's some in our book too. So any other questions? Hold on. Make sure nothing's in the chat. Okay. If not, thank you for joining. I appreciate you guys joining me, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.